Welcome to Rebecca Sounds Reveille. I'm excited today because I've got somebody who is with us today that's an American film actor, and he's known for Crisis in the Valley, Taken Over, and Acts of Violence. This is really exciting because he's going to talk to us a little bit about each one of those, and we're going to get some insight. It's really exciting because after high school, he joined the Army, and I really love this. What's exciting is he was a helicopter mechanic, and this takes him to where he's at today. And we're going to talk about that too. Why? Because there's a lot of excitement in those two things. He eventually applied for and was accepted into the Rotary Wing Flight School, and he earned his flight wings. Something not too many people can say, and many of you may, when you go in the air, hope to get some flight wings from one of the major airlines. I don't know, maybe sometimes when you were a little kid, you were hoping to get a little pair, but he really did, and he has been utilizing them for the purpose of good. It's super exciting, but after multiple overseas deployments, including those to Iraq and Afghanistan, he decided to officially retire after 23 and a half years. And that is so dedicated service to our country. It's super amazing. A lot of times, those of us who are veterans, we put our time in, and then we often go to put our service into another profession. Sometimes it's law enforcement, and sometimes it's another service field, and sometimes it's to start our career in another field. But this is a dedication that he's continued on into a service for our country in another area. And I've got to tell you, when he's not on the film set, he's working in Lifeflight. What an honor. He's doing this as a helicopter pilot. And we are really going to talk a lot about that because I can't tell you how immensely of an honor this is, because those of us who have ever had to experience that for ourselves or for our loved ones are absolutely grateful for that. His breakout film was a supporting role as Anthony King in an independent project, Crisis in the Valley. He's since been cast in numerous independent and commercial projects, including a YouTube science fiction web series, Cold-Blooded, and he played Dr. Bradley. He also has 10 credits known, and you can find that out on his IMDb page. But let's let him talk to us a little bit more today. So I'd like to welcome him to the show. Welcome, Stephen P. Hamm.
Hey, Rebecca. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for your service to our country and your service for what you're doing now, and for the laughter and all of the attention that we get to give you while you're on screen. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. And thanks for your service as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So I am absolutely ecstatic to have you on the show because we have a lot to talk about. And I want to talk about first, how did you go from high school into deciding to serve the country?
Well, basically, I guess I have my dad to thank for that. Or actually, he was the driving force. He was an Air Force veteran himself. He did 4 years, then got out, and he became a mailman. But I think because of him and his interest in the military and things of that nature, besides I did 4 years of a high school ROTC as well. So I guess you'd say I was groomed into the military service way of life. And he actually wanted me to go to the service academies. But being a rebellious little teenager, of course, my my grades weren't always the best. So I think that was kind of a hindrance to getting in. And it was something that he wanted, I think probably more than I wanted. So realizing that that wasn't going to happen for me, and I really wasn't going to be ready for the college experience. To me, it was more of a military mindset. So, you know, upon graduation, I did enlist and initially started as a helicopter mechanic, which was a good gig. I mean, not many people can say that they've done that, so it was interesting. And then, of course, after about 6 years of doing that, you hang around pilots, you see them take off after you've done work, and you hear them talk about their story, you know, where they're training or things that they've done. You get bitten by that bug. So the Army does have a program where you can apply for flight training and at any rank. And so I did, and I was fortunate enough to get selected the first time around, and the rest was history for me after that. So it was one of the best decisions I made. I enjoy flying. It's incredible. I mean, there's nothing else like it. And to me, you know, flying helicopters is totally different than, you know, flying a fixed wing airplane. It's just there's more going on. There's more you got to do. A little more uh, coordination, I guess you could say, is the right word for it. So
Well, that's interesting.
it takes time to develop those skills, but it's
You
yeah. There's you can't go from flying a helicopter to flying a plane. There's just it's night and day difference. So I mean, you have to have a license for an airplane anyway, and a different license for a helicopter pilot. So you can't just go from one to the other. I mean, and you have to keep up all your training. You know, there's evaluations that you're required to take, um, and that depends if you're, you know, instrument qualified or not. So there's a lot of that, but I do have an inclination to try to get my fixed wing license as well, but just not at this present time.
I think that that is really something that maybe most of us would not know. And the assumption would be that because this is a smaller craft, that you would have less to know or less to learn to fly it. And that's not the case.
No, it's not. The hardest thing in flight school, anyone will tell you, is probably learning to hover the helicopter and find your proverbial hover buttons, what they call it. So, you know, you got the three different controls to deal with. You know, the cyclic, which, you know, is right in front of you, that deals with, you know, forward and back and left and right movement. You got your collective, which is usually on your left, which is on your left side, that deals with, you know, taking the helicopter up and down. And then you got that small rotor in the back called the tail rotor. So that controls your yaw of the aircraft, basically your side, the pivoting motion. And so there's pedals on the floor that you have to use, you know, with pressure and counter pressure to keep uh, a certain heading, if you would call it so. So you have all these three things going on, and the problem is that, you know, when you get it picked up to hover in the first place is interesting because there's a torque issue factor you have to get, you know, about and have to counteract that as well. But once you get up in the air or get to a hover, trying to calm yourself down so you don't over control it, which is what at first does. They over control it. And, you know, it starts off very small, but after every over controlling movement, the aircraft just almost spins out of control, and, you know, bad things can happen. That's why you go up with an instructor, you know, and they can catch it before it gets too far, you know, but you only start with one control at a time, basically, until you can figure it out. So for me, they said, okay, use the pedals, and I want you to, you know, be on this heading. Let's say, you know, it's to the west, so 270, whatever. So I want you to keep the pedals and keep the heading within 10 degrees. And once you can do that, they'll give you the collective, and they want, okay, I want you to maintain, you know, plus or minus 10 feet. So once you get that down with the pedals, then they give you the cycle. Like, okay, I want you to maintain with a certain, you know, distance from where we are right now. And it just, after a while, it just, I guess it comes to you. You just relax, and once you have that done, the rest of it is actually a lot easier.
So my heart is just, you know, racing, thinking about the tail end and spinning around. What's really interesting is just recently I had my first opportunity to fly in a helicopter, which was very exciting for me.
Sightseeing?
And well, I took my grandson for a little trip at this little event that we went to, and it has been the talk, you know, all the time now that grandma and grandson has been, you know, going on this is something now that we're gonna make it a tradition to do, that we, you know, my grandson and I go in the copter ride. Pretty exciting. I was just jazzed to be in there. I thought that it was an amazing experience, and even if I could go solo in there, I think that I would. I love to learn, so I'm thinking about how much I
Yeah.
could learn just by watching. I mean, I wouldn't want to go and try to fly myself, but I think it would be an opportunity to really absorb a lot of things from many different perspectives. And it was an amazing experience. So just from that statement that I made, let me ask you this. If someone were getting ready to embark on going into learning how to fly, is it very expensive to do, and would it be better to maybe enlist in the military so that they could learn to fly? Maybe would that be a better type of training?
Well, I would kind of be biased and say that, yeah, I think the military side has better quality training per se.
Hmm.
However, on the civilian side, and obviously with the military, the training is paid for. I mean, you sign a contract to go in, and depending on how long your contract is, and flight school is usually between 9 months long for the military. But
Okay.
you're not just learning your basic flying and your instrument skills. You're learning a bunch of combat skills as well as it relates to the service. So there's a lot more that goes into that. But on the civilian side, a helicopter license is more expensive to get. I think it costs more per hour to go up with an instructor than it does for an airplane. So with an airplane, it pretty much flies itself. I mean, once you can get off the ground, it's designed to fly. A helicopter is not. I mean, the helicopter, as they say, it beats the air into submission. So you have to get the coordination going, and depending on how much money you have available, you're spending, let's say, average $150, $200 an hour, and depending how many hours it takes you to, settle down and to get comfortable with it, then once you can do it, then you go on to your next lesson. But with an airplane, yeah, it flies on its own, and I think it's probably a lot shorter time to learn everything with that. So, but with the
Okay.
military, yeah, it's you also have the military commitment as well and everything that goes with the military as an institution. So if you want to put up with that, then be my guest.
Well, yeah, I mean, just I would never trade the skills that I learned ever. Have being a veteran myself, looking back, even though it was an arduous amount of training that I did,
Yeah.
I would never trade it for the world.
No, I
Um,
would totally agree. Yeah. I learned from some of the really best instructors that I think that, this kind to offer. And, they all had their little tips and advice that they share with you. And you just collect, what you feel works for you, and you come up with your own system of how things work. So I definitely, I think a lot of the med crew I work with in my job, they can tell the difference between the civilian pilots and the military pilots, just how we function essentially, and what we do. So it's, I have a hard time seeing it, but they definitely, they can tell.
That's pretty interesting. So let's talk a little bit about you working in the industry you do now as a civilian life flight pilot, because I can only imagine how intense this is um, in comparison. I know that after 23 years that you have seen some stuff in Afghanistan and Iraq both, and without really going back to a lot of things that happened at the time, I want to talk about what you're doing now, because what you're doing now is very profound, and a lot of those listeners and those viewers that we have, those are really things that can hit home with them in their own community, and they're seeing things on television, they're hearing things on the radio, and a lot of that there is really personal, very, very personal, as opposed to things that they don't see as often or can really understand. And once we can apply that here, they'll have a better understanding of those that have gone overseas and have risked their life. And so, can you talk a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm one of the pilots for the company, and we're on call 24/7, 365, regardless. The only, I think, limiting factor for us to take a flight is mainly the weather. I have to keep an eye on that all the time. And yeah, usually the weather is the biggest thing. That, and of course, the amount of flight time we can do in one day. So unless there's a natural disaster going on, other than COVID, obviously, but we'll never reach the 8 hours that we're limited to. So, but yeah, so we get a call, and the industry now is that they call you to see if you can accept a flight from one spot to another, or to a scene, that someone got injured in, to someplace else, and you get no other information. So my job is to check the weather and to make sure that the weather is good for me to get to the word or the scene call, and then get to the destination and get back home without the weather affecting us. And if I can do that, then I tell them, yes, we can take this flight. Well, after that, then the patient information is sent over to the med crew, because in the past, you know, whether if it's like, if you were told to pay ahead of time, in the past it was known that you could make a decision whether or not you wanted to go or not, depending on how bad the weather was, if you felt it was important enough to go or not, which is the wrong answer, but that's the way it was. So now we make our decisions based on weather alone, essentially. So they get the patient info, and we try to do our best to get off the ground within 10 minutes of the call. And then we get there, and if it's most of our flights are usually interfacility, which means from hospital to hospital.
Okay.
And we get there, and the crew goes in there, and they do their assessment, and they take over care. And these people are tremendous at their job. At least 10 years of ER experience minimum. For some, others have ICU experience, but they have rigorous training, and they're expert. So they go in there, they assess the patient, they get them what we call packaged up for flight. And then I do whatever I can to assist in that, to a point. Obviously, I have no medical training, knowledge, not required. So my main thing is just to be able to transport the whole crew with the patient safely to the destination. And it gets different, especially for a scene call where you have to, if there's an auto accident on the highway or something. Of course, in Ohio, it's pretty wooded out here in some areas, so people go out there, and when it's summertime, they'll ride ATVs and stuff like that without helmets on. Get into an accident, hurt their head, or God. So you have to go out there, and the fire department responds first, of course. And once they need us, they set up what's called an LZ, a landing zone. And it's usually like 4 cones or 4 items that mark the LZ. And it can be anywhere in the field, just anywhere basically. And we have to contend with, the weather, obviously. Hopefully it's good enough to fly. Any obstacles that are being in our way, like towers and antennas, stuff like that. Especially, that's the biggest thing I got to worry about. So in the daytime, it's not that hard to deal with all that because you can see everything. But now at nighttime presents a whole entire new set of challenges. Now we do fly with night vision goggles, so that's a plus. So at nighttime when you get there, and depending on how bright the night is, pretty much relies on where the moon is in the sky. So if it's pretty decent high in the sky, then it's almost like when you have the goggles on, looking at a sunny day almost, per se, which helps a lot to identify obstacles. Now, if it's not that high yet, then it's still kind of dark out there, but the goggles do provide for you to kind of get an idea of what you're getting into. So,
Okay.
but I confirm with the crew. Go ahead.
Let me just jump in right there and ask you, you mentioned with the moon and the
Yeah.
calls for service at night. So what I'd like to know is, are there, on a full moon, more calls for service that you get?
Some have that idea that could happen. I mean, I it is kind of coincidence. I'm not really sure how the full moon would influence people going a little bit nuttier than usual. So if it does happen, I think it's more of a coincidence, essentially. But normally, like holiday weekends, when a lot of people are out drinking, you can almost guarantee, a higher call volume, just because that's what happens. People are human, and human nature takes over when you get alcohol, and you start driving, or even when you don't drive, you do other things that hurt you. So, But no, I don't think there's a correlation with that. I mean, it's probably superstition. So, but yeah, it's cool that we get to use the goggles. It definitely helps out at nighttime. Um, and yeah, I've seen some stuff, and I'll mention one thing that has hit me hard when I first started. Actually, I think it was in the first year or two of my starting in this. It was actually a Sunday morning, and I had just taken over on the day shift, and we got a call about a fire that had happened not too far away from us. And so we get to the hospital, and to make this long story short, basically, there was it was a trailer fire, and mom was and dad. So there was this trailer fire that happened one morning, and we get called, and I get there, and it was well, and basically work, and dad was at home with the kids, and I believe they were all about less than 10. So we got called for a trailer fire, and we get to the hospital to wait for the patients to arrive. And as long as it was a to do anything enough to help everyone out, but all the kids died of smoking. So I was in shock when I heard it and didn't believe it at first. But when you look at the doctor and the nurses' expressions, and you're like, oh, "This is real." And then seeing one of the nurses, literally carrying out one of the kids from the room, and just covered it in black, basically lifeless, and you knew they were going down the morgue, and it's just like, I have kids of my own, so it hits you hard for that. And I couldn't believe it. And come to find out at the end of that day, though, that I think two of the nurses at the hospital had quit that day because they couldn't deal with it anymore. That was too much for them. And
Mm-hmm.
you would think, with nurses that see a lot, but we see stuff like that. That's horrible. And then the mom finds out, when she's at work, that all her kids have passed away. She wasn't even there to see them or do anything about it. I mean, that's hard hitting. So that one sticks with me pretty good. I actually, when I got back to the base, I talked with the nurse we had and the medic that was there, because they've been doing this for a while, and we just talked it out just to get out in the open and to deal with it. And then called my kids right after that, and just to say, kind of, here's what happened. I love you guys. And so that the top of my hard hitting list of stuff that I've dealt with. That hits close to home, and you feel very bad for the mom having to deal with all that, and it's the whole family. So I mean, it's nothing you want to hear about. Unfortunately, it happens. So, but other than that, yeah, everything else we deal with, we kind of talked about this before, is that you kind of almost become numb to it because you see it so often, and you just put in different compartments in your brain, and you move on. But you got to find a way to deal with it. And when you're off of work, do something that get your mind off of it, and put you back into a good frame of mind. So hobbies that I do off of work that keep me from thinking about stuff that happens on the job. So
So what you said is really important, and I really want the audience to absorb this and keep this in their mind and in their heart, because through life and part of life, there is going to be trauma. This is a fact. And what we need to do is realize that we have to find the good part and keep that in our mind so that we can move through these things that are going to happen. And it is really important to do that. And another thing that you mentioned is that you went home and you talked to your children about these things. And so, why is this important? It is important because when we experience something, one, our family members can know that we're human too. But another thing is we can put an action plan into place on how we want to interact with our family so that we can always be sure that we show and let the other one know that we love each other. So if something does happen, that they can rest assured that that love is there in the event something does happen. So there's strategies that we can put in place to sort of help us get through different situations when things do occur, and they're going to occur. And oftentimes when situations happen, that mental health things take place, like anxieties, um, manifest. Oftentimes they come because we aren't prepared when certain situations strike us, and we can't always be prepared for them, but we can be
No.
prepared for the best of it,
Right.
um, ahead of time, by learning good coping skills along the way. And so I think that that was something that you took from a learning standpoint, and your children now are going to be able to remember that, and they will then emulate those things in them from what you did. And
Oh,
that is
absolutely. Yeah.
really important. That's a really important point. So um, I really, I'm sorry that you had to see that and go through that, and for that family that experienced that, and all of the workers surrounding that. I am really thankful that you are doing what you do. One of the questions that I have, and I'm not sure, maybe some of the others that are listening are wondering, how far do you fly? I mean, what is the furthest distance that you are allowed to go from one place to another?
Well, our main limiting thing is the amount of fuel that we can take on board. So basically, I have about, I'd say, an hour and 45 minutes of fuel at the most, really, to get anywhere. So, excuse me, I was getting a little
Okay.
teary-eyed from the previous story. So,
I'm so
um, I
sorry. I'm so
that's
sorry.
okay. I tend to can be an emotional type of guy at times. So this job, it's you try not to show any you know, too much tears and stuff, especially when you're dealing with patients and their families. You got to show the strength, and the compassion that's needed in those types of situations. So I learned that from the med crew as well. You go in there and you show compassion and you show, professionalism, and that's what they'll remember and take away from it, if nothing else. So, but no, from where I'm stationed at, or where I work out of, the main hospital is in Toledo, and I can fly anywhere as far out west as Fort Wayne, Indiana, um, to northern parts of Michigan sometimes,
Okay.
out to the east to Cleveland normally, as far as I go. We can go down to Akron sometimes, or down to Columbus. So our base is centrally located in that whole area, and we have four. Well, let's see, one main base in Toledo, and then we have three other bases um, that can service the whole entire area. So, and we also have mobile ground units that go around as well to transfer patients that don't quite meet the flight necessity.
So are you similar to then, like the fire department, where you stay at one location for 2 or 3 days at one time, or
No, we don't do that. I do a 7-week hitch, as they call it. So my 7 days incorporates a 3 day shifts, and then I transition to nights. Then I do 4 night shifts in a row. We don't stay at the base. The pilots only do 12-hour shifts, so I'm usually 7:30 to 7:30, and then when I'm done with my shift, I go home.
okay.
Once my 7 days are over with, then I'm off for a week. So
Oh
it,
wow.
it's a nice schedule. It's nice and flexible. So you find hobbies to do when you're off time, whatever it is. So I take up, I do golfing when I can. I watch movies. I do acting when I can. And this work schedule can hinder it sometimes, although it is flexible. But you just do things, get your mind off of work, and to fill up your the void.
So
So, go ahead.
let's take your mind off of what we were just talking about, and let's do talk about the opportunity that you do have with acting, because you're an incredible actor and you're doing incredible things.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So let's do talk about that, because I want to talk about some of the work that you have done. And the first thing that we did talk about Um, and I'm really excited about this because you you mentioned you did well. Let me backtrack it and we kind of work backwards a little bit. We talked about the last thing in the introduction was a web series that you did. So let's talk about that first.
Okay. Um, so through the website Backstage is where I saw this casting call for, and they were looking for a guy to play a father slash a doctor essentially. So, which I can fill that character type. Um, so I submitted my stuff, and after a few callbacks, got selected. And this was filming in New York, so I was really excited about that as well.
Oh, that is
So
exciting.
flew out there. We shot the scene, or should scenes basically, and it was a long day. I mean, I was there for about 3 days. The travel day, the shooting day, and then you leave the next day essentially. So, but it was interesting to be part of that production. And unfortunately, being with indie films, finance or trying to finance the project is the hardest thing. So the director, she had scripts written out for an entire season basically, but I think she was having problems trying to keep funding going. So we actually only shot one episode, and I haven't heard back from anything since. So I got a feeling that it's kind of like on the back burner, or maybe just dropped off. I'm not really sure, but that happens in this business too. So, but I was fortunate enough, and felt grateful enough to get cast in that and to be a part of that. So that was an interesting experience. I enjoyed that.
Sometimes it takes a little while before things come popping up to the surface and get picked up with Amazon Prime or Hulu or Netflix, and
Yeah.
it's just working out those little bit of details. So it's kind of exciting. We can watch for you, and that is Dr. Bradley. I'm super excited to see that when it comes out. But you were Anthony King also in Crisis in the Valley.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh man, that was actually my first speaking role in the film, and I've tried not to make this drag this out too long. Basically, I had seen I was on scrolling through Facebook one night, and a friend of mine who's in the film, or actually she was in a previous film of this director. She had made a post about it and about a different film, and I commented saying, "Hey, congrats on the role, or congrats on this or that." Which is what you should do with your colleagues. Always congratulate them for whatever castings they get or what they're involved in. I mean, that's what you support each other in this business. So I made a comment, and next thing you know, I get contacted by the director. He said, "I saw your comment, and you fit the bill for this character that I'm trying to replace," because he had lost his original cast member for this. And I was like, "Oh, really?" And so, he told me what the premise was and what the character was calling for. And I was a little bit apprehensive because he's like, "Hey, so he's a white guy. He can be very vulgar, with women and the way he talks and a bunch of other things." So I was a little bit apprehensive. I said, "Well, send me the script and let me see what happens." So he sent it to me, and I read through it, and I was like, "Okay." But when you're young and you want to be in a film, you almost pretty much accept almost anything that comes your way because you want to get experience and do the film. So I'm like, "Sure, I can do this." So I drove all the way out there, and we shot the scene, and um, it it was interesting. I would never speak to a woman like that ever, even though this woman played my sister. But I think that the biggest thrill or shock I had was when we went to the theater for the first premiere, and I sat there, and I was watching myself on the big screen in this scene, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm on the screen!" And I mean, the emotions that came over me were just, I was in shock, I was excited, I just didn't know what to say, and I was just, it was a thrill. But yeah, you just never know when opportunities can come your way to be part of something, especially off of responding to the Facebook post of all things. So, but the director was David Walker, Crisis in the Valley. He actually made a sequel to it as well. He's part of Walk Star Productions, and I mean, great director. He's got a whole bunch of films projects under his belt. So he's an up and comer for sure. So I was grateful to be a part of that.
Well, this is exciting. And maybe we will see you in some more of his films. Talk to me too about Taking Over. Taking Over.
Taken Over, that was a Michigan project, indie film again, and I ended up being a neighbor basically, and my job was to tackle one of the main stars. She was about to kill my neighbor actually, so I just went up there and we spent a few hours just going over the scene, and I had to literally physically tackle her to the ground. So it wasn't much to it. More of an extra type of role, essentially, no speaking, just going through the motions of the action. So, but you're still on a film set. You get to do something, and the film actually got renamed to called Enigma, and it got picked up by a distributor. So,
I love it.
it's out there. The director is Harley Wallen, so you can look him up on Facebook and IMDb. He's done several indie projects as well. He's a great director.
I absolutely love it. Now, I know you've got 10 credits to your name, and we've only got a short amount of time, so I'm going to talk to you about the last title of Act of Violence, and I would assume now that there might have might be some military connections here, but maybe I'm wrong. Talk to me a little.
Well, no, that one was I got lucky on that one as well, which tends to be my luck sometimes. So I saw a casting call. They were looking for people to portray extras as either FBI agents, EMTs, law enforcement of some sort, anything in that arena. So it was for a night shoot, and I was like, well, I'm off that day, which was going to be the next day. So I actually was that night actually. So I sent my stuff in. They're like, yeah, we like what you got, so come on down. So I did. And I had stuff set up to be an FBI agent, basically, or
Okay.
no, I'm sorry, detective. That's what it was. So I get down there and we do all our paperwork, and we get sent to the set. And it's supposed to be the final scene of the movie. And me and this other lady who are playing detectives are on the sidewalk, and we're given a notepad and said, "Okay, pretend you're taking notes because a big shootout just happened." I'm like, "Okay, great." And we're standing there. Next thing you know, the same assistant that put us there said, "Hey, come with me." Next thing you know, they take us to the porch of the house, and I see a couple or a few of the main actors from the actual movie there. I was like, wow, this is interesting. I didn't really realize what was happening at the time, but come to find out that the director had decided that he was going to have detectives escort these actors out because it was just a finish of a gunfight, and basically, they broke the law. So the main actor on the show, Cole Hauser, was there, and my job was to escort him out out of the house after the firefight. So I was the first one out the door with him, and what's really cool was that we did the take, I don't know, like 5 or 10 times because there was a winter storm coming in. But you walk outside the door, and there is a drone camera in front of you that's filming for an overhead shot. You got 2 other camera operators, A and B, at the bottom of the steps, and basically one camera is for looking at him. The other camera is portraying where Bruce Willis is supposed to be. So he knows where to look, how to do his subtle nod, and then you walk across the grass, and get him in the squad car. So that was went from an extra to a featured extra for that. Just just in a matter of seconds, it was like, wow, this is a really cool experience. So yeah, that was definitely a career highlight.
I absolutely love it. This is really exciting. You have a lot of amazing things that you're doing. Not only are they really contributing some wonderful things to the community in a very profound way that are on an intense level, but they're intense on screen. And I'm really excited about the things that you're doing. And I absolutely want to help you any way that I can. I'm absolutely grateful that you have taken the time to be here on the show and share with us the things that you have. I am just overwhelmed with delight. So thank
Oh
you.
no, I mean, the pleasure's all mine. Trust me. I appreciate you taking the time to interview me. I don't look for these kind of things myself. I get on social media. I interact with people as much as I can. I've taken tips and advice from other industry professionals of how to either promote or interact with others. So yeah, no, I'm totally grateful. In addition to all this stuff too, as I discussed with you before on our previous phone calls, is that not only the acting thing, when there's not much of that going around, then I'm also pursuing my get a license to sell real estate. So hopefully that gets done, or I can take my test next month and get licensed to do that. Plus, I'm also editing an audiobook as well. So I'm kind of the things that I didn't get a chance to do when I was in the service, I'm trying to pursue now, just trying to see how I like them and how it goes. So I got my plate full, along with trying to get some golf in and watching movies or whatever kind of floats my boat at the time. So I'm just kind of all around. But when I'm doing a job, I am focused, I am dedicated, I'm a professional, will get the best work out of me. And I mean, I like that as well. So I mean, I'm not just all, Mr. Straight and Narrow. I mean, I do like to have fun as well.
I absolutely love the things that you are saying. You're a great example to those that are listening because you're pursuing things, you're trying new interests, and I want the audience to follow you. I think you are someone that those that are looking for a mentor, someone that can they can emulate, you are a shining example. They should connect with you on social media. I
Oh man,
absolutely do. And
that's I appreciate the compliment. That's wow. I mean, that's I'm humbled by
well,
that
look at
actually.
what you've
All
done,
I can say is for people is that if it's you want to, no,
Stephen.
go ahead.
You made great choices, and you have done wonderful things for the community. And now you are in a position where you are taking an opportunity of now looking at other things, and you are enjoying life at the same time. And if you're in the Ohio area and want to buy a house, this is the man that you need to see. In addition to watching him on, among
Right?
other things.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Anytime.
So this is what I'd like you, for all of those of you who are watching and listening to the show, I would like you to connect with Stephen P. Hamm because this is the man. Tell him where they can contact you at.
You can go to my website, www.steveham.org. It'll take you to my official site. Has links to all my platforms as well. So it's a one-stop shop for everything. So that's best place to go. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to another episode of Rebecca Sounds Reveille. I'm just so jazzed about this show because I think this is an opportunity for you to have an absolutely fantastic connection and someone who is an absolutely outstanding, as we say in the military, outstanding example of someone. So for all of those of you who want to connect, absolutely connect with him. I want to thank you for tuning in. Make sure that you like the show, subscribe, do all of those things. I want you to share the show with everybody that you know and everyone you don't. Thanks for tuning in.